On a small island somewhere between Indonesia and Australia, a small people with their own language and their own identity wage a war of liberation. They declare independence, but face a powerful foreign army. There's no surrender to the invaders. The world slowly awakens to the suffering and finally decides to intervene, to rebuild what was destroyed, to bring families back together, to set the foundations for the first new nation of the new millennium.
A nossa libertação por este país.
For our liberation, for this country, we paid a price.
Foi o sofrimento, foi a tristeza.
There was suffering and sadness. Families were destroyed, and yet we never lost hope.
Sob o sinal da esperança, da determinação.
We were determined one day we would have a free country. But we had to pay a price for our freedom. And we paid it with our own bodies, our souls, our blood.
Nossa alma, o nosso sangue.
In just 1 week, East Timor will celebrate its independence. Everywhere, Jacinto Alves sees evidence of a remarkable experiment. It's the first time the United Nations governs a country. It's rebuilt the police, the army, nearly every public institution. Now the UN is handing over power to the first democratically elected government in East Timor's history.
Conseguiram fazer com que nós temos uma Constituição, temos parlamento.
They made it possible for us to have a constitution, a parliament, a new government.
UNTAET podemos considerar como companheiro da luta.
The UN has been a partner in our struggle. It's brought us freedom and laid the groundwork for independence.
Da transição para a independência de Timor-Leste.
Jacinto once fought for freedom with these guerrillas. Their struggle began in the early 1970s, in the last days of the Portuguese Empire. It was a time when Portuguese East Timor's capital was still a bizarre holdout from colonial centuries past. The Portuguese had been here for more than 400 years. But a revolution in Lisbon meant that the colonial governor would leave the island, never to return. A broad-based coalition of Timorese parties declared independence. It would only last a few days. Neighboring Indonesia planned to quash these rebels, to make East Timor its 27th province. Indonesia's assault involved some 20,000 troops. The United States, a major ally and arms supplier, was informed but did nothing to stop the invasion. And more than half the people of East Timor fled to the mountains.
Eu com a minha família fugimos para o mato.
I escaped with my family to the bush. I took up arms to defend our country.
A minha pátria, a minha nação.
While the world ignored the bloodshed, the Timorese fought on for years. Thousands died battling the invader, but many more perished from hunger and disease.
E então reparei como os velhos ficavam ali sentados e morriam.
I saw old people sit down and die of hunger, of exhaustion,
Nunca se entregavam
but they would not
aos
surrender.
indonésios. Daí compreendi muito bem. Eu o espírito decisivo do meu povo.
I understood just how deeply my people wanted freedom.
Entendi muito bem. E prometi para mim lutar.
So I promised myself that I would keep on fighting for them. That's what I've done.
The new occupiers seal off the country and assume total control. Indonesia is mostly Muslim, and East Timor is Christian. But religion is not an issue. Crowded Indonesia wants the land, and it knows there's oil off the Timorese coast. But the resistance will not be silenced. Demonstrators head toward a local cemetery to pay homage to a slain activist. As an organizer, Jacinto observes the protest from the sidelines.
Os demonstrantes vinham daquele lado para cá.
The demonstrators came down this street shouting, "Long live Timor!"
E outras, a comitiva que vinha à frente estavam a rezar.
And some of those in front were praying to show it was a peaceful demonstration.
Pacificamente. Chegaram até aqui, dirigiram para o cemitério.
Then they headed to the cemetery.
Indonesian soldiers open fire, but this time a documentary camera is rolling. These images will shock the world, create pressure for change.
Declaro
270 are killed at the demonstration Jacinto helped to organize.
A morte não foi por minha culpa.
Their death was not my fault.
Porque não queria trair
I would not betray the blood of the young people spilled at the cemetery.
esses jovens derramados no cemitério. E como consequência, apanhei os 10 anos da prisão.
As a consequence of the demonstration, I went to jail for 10 years.
Durante 9 meses, não podíamos ter contatos com ninguém.
For 9 months, we had no contact with anyone. They wanted to isolate us totally. The walls and the ceilings were all painted white.
Era fazer uma lavagem cerebral.
They wanted to brainwash us, so we would beat each other up.
Aquela cela que entre nós se batiam uns aos outros. Aqui, olha, continua a existir Este. E assim ali, né?
Nós tínhamos também ali o nosso oratório, né?
Sim.
Porque nesses momentos difíceis, onde o homem, onde estamos longe, né? Longe do mundo, é só a comunicação com o divino.
O divino. O homem consciente ser fraco, né? Tem de encontrar uma força para poder superar. Isso reflete, portanto, a nossa fé.
As Jacinto and his friends languish in their cells, something is changing beyond these walls. Quiet international diplomacy is paving the way to freedom. A new Indonesian government allows a UN mission to enter East Timor. The mission calls for a referendum on the country's future. But it's not a perfect deal. The UN people are mostly civilians. The occupying army remains in control. And yet, the promise of a vote supervised by the United Nations fills the Timorese with hope.
Senti tanta alegria,
I felt so happy then,
mas por outro lado também sentia as lágrimas a sair.
but I also cried.
E também orgulho.
I felt pride that our sacrifice was not in vain. We got what we wanted.
Conseguimos aquilo que nós queríamos.
But just as the United Nations steps in, these Timorese militiamen step up a vast campaign of intimidation. The Indonesian army has bought their loyalty with paychecks and guns. Their job is to keep their fellow Timorese away from the polls. And the militias make a solemn, secret vow. If Indonesia loses the referendum, a terrible fate awaits East Timor. As the ballot boxes arrive, the United Nations thinks of ways to get the message out. It's safe to vote for Indonesia or independence. The referendum campaign even has its own catchy tune. It says, ballots are secret. There's nothing to fear. On the fateful morning of August 30th, 1999, an astonishing number, 95% of registered voters, show up at the polls. Many have waited a lifetime for this chance. A crushing majority, 8 out of 10 Timorese, choose independence. But the militias reject the result. The UN has no soldiers to stop them. Indonesia had refused to allow them in. So Indonesian police are in charge of security.
Isso foi grande erro.
That was a big mistake.
E também devemos então dizer essa responsabilidade também à ONU.
I must say the UN bears some responsibility.
Entregar as mãos.
It entrusted our security to those who massacred us for 24 years.
Massacrar todo este povo indefeso.
The militias set fire to nearly every city and town in East Timor. In Dili, 4 out of 5 buildings are burning. As the capital smolders, the UN Security Council authorizes a military force to enter the country. It's an Australian-led multinational force with one mission: to restore order to a country in chaos.
I saw a skyline of smoke and the suburbs in flames. I saw the outcome of tremendous violence, looting, arson, with only troops and very few civilians left in the city, and it was a very sad sight. We deployed soldiers to as many parts of the city of Delhi that we could reach initially, and we established security checkpoints, patrols. We started to disarm civilian people who were carrying weapons and generally act as a force for law and order.
The intervention force seizes thousands of militia weapons. Then it makes sure they will never be used again. But the militias had 16 days to use those weapons before the multinational force arrived.
Eles chegaram atrasados, obviamente, quando o último membro das milícias partiu.
They were late, obviously. They arrived when the last militiaman was gone. No battles were fought to save Dili. That wasn't necessary. But what happened, happened, and it's over.
É o que é, ou diria, foi o que foi.
As the multinational force prepares to leave East Timor, its mission is fully accomplished. Law and order is restored. But some soldiers regret the mission's timing.
Generals are supposed to be pragmatic, and I'm pragmatic enough to know that we came as quickly as the international community would have allowed. If I have a formula which I take from the example here in East Timor, I would say to the United Nations, debate strongly, decide quickly, act early.
Two months after East Timor burns, the United Nations sends in a new peacekeeping mission. It must govern the country, give humanitarian assistance, and rebuild, all at the same time.
How to resurrect this country was the question that came through my mind many times, and I must admit to you that I was scared, that the task was too big for us, the United Nations, that had no experience in this kind of business. Nothing was functioning. Public administration had collapsed. There were no public services. Most of public and private buildings had been destroyed. The infrastructure was no longer there. So it was truly a nightmare. And how to build a new nation on that basis was mind-boggling for many months. Every day brought new emergencies.
Hungry Timorese overrun a rice distribution center. The militias destroyed not just their homes, but their rice crops. Now the World Bank raises $200 million for international emergency assistance. a wounded country slowly begins to heal. All through the crisis, the Catholic Church gave shelter and support to the faithful. Now the UN searches for educated Timorese leaders to rebuild the schools. It finds Father Filomeno Jacob, who had called for international help in risky secret interviews during the occupation.
Aquilo que é para nós a nosso favor. Portanto, o povo está continuamente a sofrer e a morrer por falta de saúde, de assistência médica.
Já não queremos mais guerra, nós queremos agora uma paz. Mas com o apoio das Nações Unidas.
Father Jacob gave that interview here at the Diocese of Dili. The records of the old mission schools are all destroyed. But Father Jacob rebuilt his country's school system as Minister of Education in the UN transitional government.
Nós restabelecemos todas as escolas no país com 220.000 crianças
We
estudantes.
reopened all the schools with 220,000 students. But our most ambitious project was training new teachers. It's a whole new curriculum, a new mindset for a new country.
Uma reestruturação do sistema, do currículo, mas sobretudo das mentalidades, a construção de novo país.
Everywhere in East Timor, children were witnesses to violence a child should never see. As soon as schools reopened, bringing life back to normal became the goal of teachers and principals.
A única palavra que eu disse aos alunos assim.
I told my students they should not think about what happened in 99.
No ano 99.
The past is dead.
O passado morreu, nós vamos viver o presente.
Live the present and prepare for independence.
But the past won't go away. It haunts Julito da Costa. The student lives just behind his school. From his hideout, Julito saw what soldiers did to his school. Some 700 schools were torched all over the country. For months, the children sat on the floor with only a tarp as a roof. Under an emergency program, UN soldiers rebuilt more than half the burned schools, including Filomena's.
Quando eu vi que as tropas de outras nações vieram fazer reconstruir novamente.
When I saw that soldiers from other nations came to rebuild the schools, it filled me with happiness and gratitude.
E ao mesmo tempo gratidão, né? Sexta classe pode entrar na sala.
Filomena Piedade speaks Portuguese to her students. When the Indonesian occupiers took over, she went home to raise her kids. The new system has brought her out of retirement along with Portuguese, which is now the official language of instruction. The problem is that only 1 out of 20 students speaks Portuguese. Their mother tongue is Tetum.
My own personal view is that even though Tetum is spoken nowhere else, this is their true language, and it is that language that they should develop, promote, and upgrade to turn it into a functional, official language of East Timor.
Outra vez. Pelo caminho.
Eles acham que português é muito difícil.
They think Portuguese is very difficult to pronounce. We help the kids using Tetum, but it's hard.
É muito difícil.
Desejando-lhes bom dia. O menino não chega tarde à escola, portanto...
It's not easy to go through school using someone else's language. But Portuguese is the tongue of the old guerrilla commanders and the educated elite.
Nós temos uma história, nós temos
We have a history that links us to the family of Portuguese-speaking nations. We have historical, political, and diplomatic
É
ties.
muito simples. Razões históricas, político-diplomáticas.
There might be linguistic tensions in their future, but their choices will no longer be dictated by the military force that shaped their early lives. It's a time of hope for the Timorese. They've gone from international neglect to massive international assistance. The United Nations pours in hundreds of millions of dollars in equipment, grants, advice. Wealthier countries run their own programs. None has contributed as much as Japan. They've rebuilt schools, canals, and 1,000 kilometers of roads, cutting through mountains and monsoons to link up a tiny country half the size of Belgium, and to reach into forgotten lands where time has stopped. Lito Freitas escaped with his prized violin, where the militias burned down his village and his rice. Akira Kamidozono is a rice expert who thinks he can improve Lito's harvest and Lito's life. But nothing is simple when different cultures come together. Working a single hectare of land, Lito's family produces 5 tons of rice. But they are 11 people. They eat all they harvest. There's nothing left to sell at the local market, and a bit of extra income would make a big difference. It sounds logical to Akira. More rice, more money, better life. But only 6 weeks after his arrival, the foreign expert is told his knowledge of agriculture is not needed here.
初めにそのあたりをイントロデュース紹介して一緒にやっていこうとしたんですけども、やはり日本の
I wanted to introduce Japanese techniques, but Japan has its own culture and techniques, and here they're different.
すぐにこちらでできないという状況が起こりまして、こまめな水管理。
So I couldn't apply Japanese know-how right away. I understood that my techniques couldn't be transferred quickly.
すぐには移転はできないということが起こりました。
But Akira will not be defeated. His development agency in Tokyo allows him to switch roles. The teaching is over. Akira is now a student researching Timorese agricultural society, studying a proud people who have always resisted foreigners.
He's come from far away, but he has not taught me much. When it comes to planting and harvesting rice, I already know all that.
Akira finds the Timorese are not so different. Here, farmers make little offerings to the gods, just as they do in Japan. Some chicken meat and rice will please the god of the rainfalls. The rain will come, the rice will grow. Akira learns that here, life's not about money or progress. It's about planting and harvesting, family and friendship. Recently, Akira suggested that planting rice in neat rows makes it grow taller and fuller. Prove it, said Lito. So they tried the old way and the new way, side by side. Akira may be right, but he's not too eager to prove it.
To grow rice, I must know about nature and about people. I should respect people and their culture. I've been working on this idea.
International advisors like Akira have improved production in 2/3 of the country's arable land. The most successful advisors balance technical and human skills. They listen carefully because they want to be heard.
They're learning, and so am I. They may accept or reject what I show them, but I'm not sad or resentful. Surely something will come of all this work.
The Timorese are learning a few new moves to improve their game. As for Akira, he's learned to improvise and has found a measure of success. After the rampage, the militias vanish from East Timor to escape retribution. But they commit one last crime. They take 250,000 people hostage and force them to leave East Timor. Entire families deported at gunpoint languish in makeshift refugee camps. It's the job of the United Nations to bring them all back home.
He's going to the same place, Likisa district, Marbawa sub-district, village of Gugureva. Stand by.
Every week, Fidelis Magalhães travels from the capital to one of several border outposts.
We are going to Batagare from Delhi, and it will take 2 hours from here to Batagare. Batagare is right at the border. Today we heard rumors that 1,000 refugees supposed to return, but we'll see.
Fidelis's job is to monitor the delicate transfer across the border. These people have been away from home for more than 2 years. They're carefully screened as they return. Their health matters, so does their past. The militias have often told them it's dangerous to come back. It's not. But they're asked questions that may instill uncertainty and fear.
It's important for me to be here to make sure that the people who get sick, if they can't travel to Delhi for long distance or they can't. She was a bit scared, so I was asking her, like, so what's wrong with your baby? She says, my baby got sick in West Timor, got diarrhea. Have you seen the doctor? I said, yes, I've seen. And then the doctor gave him some medicines for the baby. Bate doctor, no? You didn't la moras?
Center batu gare e nene fatine neve che libre fatine neve che ya quando ba siguranza niyan sila ya problema nene in most na sam Timor War sai
Josefina Martins has returned with her mother. Josefina's father stayed behind. She won't say if he was a militiaman. But even militiamen are returning. By now, the UN has repatriated 200,000 people. The program is a success because revenge is rare.
That wouldn't touch them. That wouldn't even beat them up. When I talked to them, I said, like, why? I mean, are you stupid? Why? What's wrong with you guys? I mean, you should get angry, or I mean, it's because it's normal. As human beings, I mean, you can't just, everything's okay. That's fine, that's fine. And they looked at me like, like, what? What do we have to do? It's not important for us to beat them up because we are really sick of fighting, of war.
Fidelis, too, is sick of war. His own scars take their time to heal.
My father was the head of East Timor National Resistance Council of this area.
When the militias set fire to East Timor, they also went gunning for pro-independence politicians, like Fidelis' father. A documentary team captured the moment when his remains were found.
He was trying to hide, to escape, and then he went to a place called Ritapo, Mulao, and then he was there with the rest with 14 people. And finally a guy, a militiaman, saw them and he went to report, and then they came back, and then 14 of them, they all were killed, including my dad. And they were killed by this, by Indonesian military and militia. It wasn't only militia.
Some say the militias killed 1,000 people. No one knows for sure.
This skull is a male human skull, and what it shows is at the back behind the ear is this oval defect there, which is not present on the other side. And it's a gunshot entry wound. The pattern, it being in the back of the head low down, is quite a typical pattern for an execution style killing.
Most of those Fidelis has helped are victims themselves, ordinary people happy to go home. But Fidelis has also helped people who are not so innocent. He has mixed feelings.
Two families, okay, you're right. Thank you very much, this is all.
It's not only a job. Often I have to deal with some militias too. Sometimes, like, when I see them, I get really hurt because I know what they did. Often I really want to take revenge and to pay back what they did. But I think it's more something, it's a feeling, it's something that you can deal with, you can cope with.
At Josefina's village, this is a special day. If there are any questions about the past, no one will ask them now. Fidelis says he's never heard anyone acknowledge guilt.
People want to reconcile, they want to say hi to their friends, to reestablish their relationship again, but they want their friends to know, to admit what they did. It's time for us to rebuild, to move on, but it's time for us also to remember what happened, not to forget. We are nothing without the past. Without our parents, I'm not here today. Now I will not forget for sure. I will always remember. It's something that I have to remember forever. I think it's not right to say that we have to forget because we want to move on. We can't move on if we forget. That's my point.
Justice is the single most sensitive issue in East Timor. As soon as guerrilla leader Xanana Guzmão returns from exile, he promises that no crime will be forgotten.
I will always appeal to the people that directly or indirectly involve themselves in the violence and destruction to come and to face our people. We will not take any revenge, but they have to confess their crimes to the people.
Finally, justice has a chance. The UN and a handful of wealthy countries back a new commission for truth and reconciliation. Among the commissioners sworn into office is former prisoner Jacinto Alves. Serious crimes like murder will be judged by East Timorese courts. The commissioners will deal with lesser offenses, such as assault and arson. But they're facing overwhelming political pressure. They're told not to look at crimes committed by pro-independence factions during a short civil war in 1975. And they're asked to be soft on Indonesia, still a powerful neighbor. But Jacinto thinks there should be justice for all.
Without justice, there will be no reconciliation. It will be empty political rhetoric. dos líderes, dos políticos.
Justice will begin with an inquiry into the oppression and violence that killed at least 200,000 people, 1 out of 3 Timorese, over a quarter century.
Dali datang dari tiak dari Solo ba ouvinte suatu Radio Timor-Leste se hahuho notícias nacionais ou internacionais.
In a couple of days, the East Timorese will wake up in an independent country, but they'll still be facing the same problems. Most Timorese live on less than $1 a day. One of the poorest, least educated people on earth. That's the audience of Paula Rodriguez.
Imi sei hamutu ko hau Paula Rodriguez hanu belu juvia taidi durante horas ida nela ramba oi lius informações nebe ami recolheu na ba imi. Kona ba população nebe carig mais ou menos 50% nebe analfabetos se dá o
50% of the people don't know how to read or write. Our task is to free them from illiteracy. And journalists have a special responsibility. This is really important to me.
Paula and her colleagues at the UN-funded station learned about fair and balanced journalism from foreign instructors, the so-called internationals.
How depois how serviço a motocicleta, how bel haquerek notícia, how bel halo entrevista, how bel halo.
After working with them, I can write the news, conduct interviews, ask tough questions. They gave us real motivation and the belief that we can get things done. Now that they're gone, we can do it all ourselves.
But the future's unclear. Although Paula does not know it yet, the funding and freedom of her station are hotly discussed behind closed doors. Still, in East Timor's new democracy, a reporter can freely enter the House of Parliament, spot the finance minister, and ask her a tough question or two.
Senhora Ministra Finanças Nian, Senhora Madalena Itabot bele explica.
As the UN leaves, jobs are being lost. What will the government do?
Período depois de Timor-Leste retentando a independência, mais ou menos o sabe orçamento para Timor-Leste.
Agora se berreta vice-ministra também me reformou o ministério.
The minister has no answers. She says she's new on the job. Paula ponders her people's uncertainty. There's oil in East Timor's future, but that's still several years away. After independence, the UN will keep a much smaller mission here. So much of the money spent on the streets will be gone, and Dili will languish without the hard cash.
If unemployment grows, we'll have serious problems. A lot of people have nothing to eat. Their children can't go to school. The UN will keep on supporting us, but we must invest the money wisely to bring unemployment down, to create stability, or potential investors won't come.
Imi foi Ronald Liban, Noticiário Nacional Internacional, Husi Radio Timor-Leste.
Back at the station, Paula is shocked to find out that her own job is on the line. As the UN pulls out, her station faces a financial crisis. International funders say they'll walk away unless the country's new leaders guarantee free and impartial journalism. And the new government offers no guarantees.
The wording, in this broadcasting regulation does not provide real, security that this will become a real independent public broadcasting corporation. What is the situation?
What's at stake is freedom of the press in the new democracy.
During this meeting, we heard a lot of information that there is no solution for the future of this radio and TV after the United Nations leave this country.
The station might die or become a tool of government propaganda.
If this happens, it will be better if I stop working here. We don't want to be pressured to say what's not true. We have no fear. We will always demand our independence.
A few months later, Paula's station will get by on a shoestring, still not assured of independence. There's no easy road for the Timorese. But as they cross the capital to witness the independence ceremony, many reflect on their country's amazing strides. In little more than 2 years, they've elected their first constituent assembly, approved their first constitution, elected their first president. The new democracy has overcome a legacy of violence.
Prophets of doom predicted violence, predicted blood in the streets of Dili. Nothing of the sort happened. The Timorese gave, a lesson to other democracies, well-established democracies around the world.
The world is watching to see whether the United Nations' most ambitious nation-building effort in history succeeds or fails.
This was our child. East Timor is the baby of the United Nations. Perfection cannot be achieved in 2 years, but I think the foundations are there for East Timor to prosper.
Broadcasting the event live, Paula is a key witness to the birth of a nation.
I have no doubt that you will fulfill your new roles as citizens of East Timor and of the world with spirit and great success. I have the honor to transfer executive authority from the United Nations Transitional Administration to the institutions of the Democratic Republic of East Timor.
Foi o fim de uma etapa e o início de outra.
This is the end of an era, the beginning of another.
O futuro para uma grande planície em frente.
We are at the top of the mountain, and we contemplate the future like great plains ahead of us. We face our promised land, our free country.
Da nossa terra prometida, desse país de liberdade.